Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
I'm going to start this off with some home inspections. If anybody has a home inspection that they want Mr. Warwick to look at right now, if you have code questions about it or you've seen something that's weird, you are welcome to send it to my email address and he will take a look at it right now. All right, we're going to start off with a couple of ones that I've seen here lately, and then we're just going to talk about codes and permits for the different cities and stuff, when you need a permit, when you don't need a permit, updates that have happened here recently. All right, Bill, you want to take it away?
Sure. What kind of questions you have on this?
So, there's one specific part of this. Okay, this is this one. This is the one that was the older one with the issue under the crawl space here that I had up a second ago. And let me see if I can find it. I think I'm going the wrong way.
Yeah, I think you're already on it.
Was that the crawl space?
Yeah.
There was something turned in the wrong direction in the crawl space on this one. So this is an older house. It was built in 1910, I believe. And they had already done quite a bit of crawl space repair in there. And some of it was done correctly, and some of it was rather interesting, to say the least.
I think you passed it.
Did I pass it? I'm trying to remember. No, because it had pictures of cinder blocks. There we go. There we go. So, and I had to send this to Bill because my clients had questions about the crawl space. So, and here is some of the work that was done by a different company. And if anybody has any questions, please stop me.
So those blocks, and I can't obviously see if they were, if there's a concrete base there or not. But typically, when you have blocks under the house like that, if I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but on the top left-hand corner and the top right-hand corner, you see there's a little bit of wood below the blocks, and typically that's not a good practice. I don't think it's necessarily bad or illegal or anything like that, but typically you want the block to be directly underneath the joist. In some cases, it's hard to get the height right, but typically you want to get that direct block to direct block, and you want to have mortar joints. So it looks like they mortar the joints there. So this is okay. I mean, it doesn't look like it's the best job. It looks like one of those piers is actually at an angle, so maybe they didn't put a concrete base on the soil, and that may be why he flagged it, because there's no concrete base. But those are the kinds of things you want to look for. And Christy, if you scroll down a little bit to, yeah, so again here, on the left hand side, he's got a couple of full blocks, and he's got a half pier. That's the way you want it. But then on the right hand side, you can see here that he used, some kind of wood products in between, and there's a piece of wood that's not pressure treated, so that's definitely not right. You have to use pressure treated wood underneath here, in these kind of situations, just to be safe. So, if you want to go to that other photograph, Chrissy, that was the one that really was of most concern. The one with the 2x4s turned sideways. It was real close to that. That one, yeah. So that one right there definitely got flagged because there's no piers there. There's no mortar. There doesn't appear to be any concrete base. And the only thing holding that joist up is looks like a couple of 2x4s and maybe 2x6 turned sideways. So that's absolutely not right. nothing right about that at all. Plus, the joist looks like it's compromised a little bit as well, maybe some rock damage. So,
So what do you do to
um,
fix it?
you'd have to you probably sister the joist because it looks like it's got rod on it, and then you would put new supports. Depending on the span, concrete, or I should say cinder block. Supports with a little bit of a concrete base on the bottom of it. Um, and of course, the base has to be below the frost line, which is typically 12 to 14 inches in this area. So yeah, so that's just multiple flags on that one, and I'd be concerned about that, especially since it looks like it's hard to tell what's going on there because you've got some unusual um, joist configurations there. So I think what this might have been, and it's hard to tell this might be a double beam that they put under there just to support that area. Maybe it was sagging or something like that. It looks like a porch extension or maybe something was put on it. So this looks like just a homeowner special or a jackleg special. That's definitely not um, the way that it should be. You know what I mean? Multiple issues there.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Not to mention the fact all the debris under there, and you see those nails right there. So any worker that goes under there is in danger of getting a tetanus shot or something like that. So you definitely don't want that kind of stuff under a house, and wires all over the place and nothing nailed up. It's just kind of a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I got this one.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, you want to make sure that all of your exterior, that's a gable vent. You want to make sure that all your vents and stuff like that, anywhere that's letting air in or air out, is doesn't have these big huge gaps in it. That's a sure way to get rats. Norway rats or squirrel or raccoon in your house, and they can cause serious damage really quick. Rats will actually eat insulation off of wiring, and they'll eat anything. And the reason for that is because they constantly have to sharpen their teeth. So the way they sharpen is just by chewing on stuff. They don't actually. I don't know if they actually eat it, but they chew on it to sharpen their teeth. And so we had 1138. The previous tenant was vacant for a little while, and we had a whole bunch of rat issues. They basically ate all of the ducting. You remember that, Chrissy?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a chore to get it under control. So in fact, when we pulled the HVAC out, they had made nests inside of the ductwork. So whenever the ductwork was on, you're basically breathing in. I mean, we changed it all out, of course, but I mean, when we pulled the ductwork out, they literally had rats running out of it. So it's something you should all. I always recommend to everyone you get some glue traps. They're very effective. Take the glue traps and put them up in your attic space to catch any rodents or critters that are up there. And that's a good way to keep it under control. It's about the only way that I know. That and rat poison. Tomcat is a good rat poison. I would put it in a container so only the rats can get it, and that's what I would recommend everyone to do
Okay.
to help keep that to a minimum. So what we're looking at right now is a really, really bad, poor pipe collar job, and not only that, but they have a roof vent right next to a pipe collar, and they should never be that close. I'm just
Why?
well, because there's no way to get the flashing and everything correct. You have to have the pipe collar should be all by itself, so that you can put the shingles around it the proper way. And you definitely don't want the other one's what's called a static vent. That's just to let air out of the attic. You don't want those that close to each other. The other reason too is I believe there's a mechanical code as well. That roof vent is venting sewer gas essentially, right? So you
You're talking
could
about
get
the pipe, just
yeah,
for people
the
that don't
vertical
know.
pipe. Yeah. The vertical pipe is what's called a DWV vent, and DWV just means drain waste vent. And so all of our houses have to have some way to vent the plumbing so that it's called the siphon effect, so that water can actually flow through the tube. It's the same siphon effect if you put your hand over the top of a straw, and the water won't come out of the straw. So that's called basically the siphon effect. So if you don't have a vent, at least one or usually it's one or two. Code has reduced the size of them in recent years, but basically you need a plumbing vent, a DWV vent to go to the outside, and typically you want those vents. There's certain rules and codes for that. You don't want a vent that's giving off sewer gas to be so close to another static vent. And the problem with that would be under the right conditions, theoretically, you could have sewer gas blow right back into the static vent, and then you've got sewer gas in your house. I mean, theoretically, your house could explode if enough methane gas built up in there. I mean, it would be extremely rare. I mean, I don't think it's ever happened, but I mean, under the right conditions, it could be possible. So the two things you have there is you don't have the right flashing, you don't have the right spacing, and you don't want that sewer gas to back up into your static vent. So it fails on three different areas basically.
How far from the edge of the roof or from the peak of a roof can the vents be?
I don't know that there's any actual real code for that. The code is really just
That
to
it
make
has to
sure.
exist.
What's that?
The code is just that one has to exist.
Yeah, basically. But general rule of thumb is like that's so close to the corner, to the edge of the wall. The problem with that is wind-driven rain can come up underneath that flashing. So, it's just a really however that worked, it was just a really poor design. You generally speaking, you want to keep them a foot or two away from the edge. And the reason for that is because when we do the roofs, we put what's called ice and water shield around the perimeter. Not everybody does that, but if we do, if we do a good job, we don't want to recall. So we use ice and water shield. The ice and water shield is about a 3-foot peel and stick product that goes around the perimeter of the roof and usually along the ridge cap. So all along the rake, which is the part that slopes up, that's the rake, and the fascia, which is the horizontal part that we're looking at right now in this picture. You want to keep any penetrations at least 3 feet away from that edge if you can. And the reason for that is because if you have a penetration that you have to put right there, that's what the pipe callers call penetration, then you're basically putting a hole in that ice and water shield, and now you're basically compromising the ability of that edge to withstand wind-driven rain as well as ice damming. So it's like a quadruple fail on that. And it's best, and again, you're going to run into situations, especially in old houses, and I think you said it was a 100-year-old house where.
Oh, this is a different one, but this is 1980s.
1980s, yeah, that's kind of it's interesting that they did it like that, and it's not that they haven't done it like that. I mean, a lot of pipe crawlers are going to be maybe on the outside wall towards the edge of it, but today when that was built, they might not have had ice and water shield. You know what I mean? That's kind of a more recent sort of development in the roofing industry. So all of these things, best practices are for new construction, and when you got older construction, these are the kinds of things that you run into.
Does anyone have any questions? Check the little chat. Nope. Okay. You're moving right along. I can't remember what house this is. Nope. Nope. Oh, yep. I wanted to see this one specifically had what was once an open courtyardy thing in the house. On the back side of the house, they had put something over it, like a overhang over it, and it was kind of weird. And so I apologize, I have to find this. Because I found all of these things earlier. There we go. Okay. So I don't know if you got a picture. Yeah, from underneath of it. Okay. So this right here in figure 11 was not original to the house. So you see the ridge in figure 11.2, how it kind of dips down. It's because that's plywood and that's looking up at it from underneath. And it has some, like it had like a little bow to it. It was kind of weird, but I don't know, Bill, what do you think of it? I mean, you can't see much, unfortunately.
It looks like a hole. I don't know. Yeah, it looks like.
You'd see the ridge in it, like where it doesn't
Yeah.
quite meet up with the roof quite right.
Yeah, just bad framing. It looks like they didn't really frame it to the right height, or someone used the wrong thickness of plywood or something like that. Somebody screwed up. 'Cause it should all be smooth and level if they were going to fill that in. So You know, it could have been a homeowner special, honestly. It looks like what is that? Just like a breezeway?
So it was like a little like courtyardy type thing in
And they
these
filled
style
it in.
houses. So like there's, if you look inside of it, like through the screens, there's like two sliding glass doors. One of them is the kitchen, one of them is the living room, and then the window. So it was an outdoor like little court, like private courtyard, right?
Yeah.
So whoever owned this prior to, my people buying it, put this like structure and made this part of the roof so that they could make a covered area.
Yeah, it looks like a homeowner special because I mean, something like that you could kind of get away with it because it's probably in the backyard, no one can see it, and I mean technically you're supposed to pull a permit when you change the structure, but I could totally see a homeowner doing that,
Oh
by
yeah.
themselves, and that's because a professional, any professional that's worth their salt when I mean that's an easy job for a professional. So the only way to screw that up is that you don't really know what you're doing and you're not professional.
Mm-hmm. And then I had a question from another agent yesterday morning that had a similar structure put onto the back of a house. So somebody put a like a covered porch, right, on the back side of this house. Okay. And it has electrical and everything to it. So, but the structure wasn't lag bolted into the top of the house in any way, shape, or form. It was like kind of freestanding and the shingles just ran down onto it.
Right?
So like, how does it have to be attached to the house?
This particular structure right here.
No, so like something similar to this. Like if I wanted to build one of these on the back of my house and kind of tie it into my house.
I mean, you can nail it. You don't necessarily have to have lag bolts going into it. I mean, as long as you're marrying up to the existing structure and you've got point loads that carry the loads down to the ground, which I don't actually see in this case. So I'm kind of wondering how they did it. Yeah, I mean, basically, as long as you have a load path that goes from the load down to the ground, then you can use nails. You don't necessarily have to use lag bolts or anything like that. I mean, it's perfectly fine to nail them or screw them together. Screws would be better actually, but
Okay.
yeah. So sometimes you do need to use, yeah, like in a situation. Well, even that, like a quadruple beam. I mean, they have specific nailing
Oh,
patterns in the
hey,
rule
yeah, you
book.
can keep going on the roof thing, but like,
Yeah,
I was just getting ready for the next one. Does anyone
yeah.
have any questions at all? Because I'm going to show you guys how to look up permits for the cities too here in a moment. So this is another one that we see personally all of the time on a lot of these houses, which is this jack.
Yeah, it's a house jack. So
Mhm.
I'm actually not exactly sure what the code is on that because here's the thing. Um, the problem with the house jacks is that they're made out of steel. So their weight rating is usually more than enough to do it. I mean, unless they're trying to hold up a 4-story building, which is totally different. But I mean, for 1 or 2 story dwellings, these house jacks are basically engineered to be temporary supports. And
Mhm.
so really what we would do is we would use that as a temporary support. It's got a little screw thing on it to maybe, like the name implies, jack it up a little bit. And then what we would do is we would put permanent, mortar, a block and inside there, cinder block, conventional term, CMU block is what we call it, and then do that the right way with mortar joints. So it's probably obviously it was put in there a long time ago. You can see the rust on it. So it's okay for a temporary support structure, but to be in compliance with code, you really want to replace that with a couple courses of cinder block and do it the right way. So I mean, in a pinch, I mean, obviously, like it would work for a while, but I mean, I would advise my client that at some point in the future you should replace it. So it's not a deal breaker per se, but it's definitely not something that you want to leave there forever because eventually it will rust and corrode, and then you'll have an issue with sagging floors and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So technically it will work, but it's really only meant to be temporary.
Okay. All right. Can you tell us how to properly sister a beam? Because we see them incorrectly all of the time and it definitely freaks out our people.
So basically use pressure treated wood, and whenever you sister beam, you want to go use the same thickness of the wood, same height. So if it's a 2x8, you put a 2x8 in, and you always use pressure treated wood, and you always have it go from one support to the other. So if you see at the end, it's bearing on that sill plate right there, and usually you need an inch and a half bearing, a minimum, meaning at least an inch and a half of that joist has to sit on that or more. Usually it's 2 inches, depends on how it's constructed. But as long as you have an inch and a half of bearing minimum, for most structures, and you match the height, it's 2x8 to a 2x8 and it's pressure treated, then and you have sort of specific nailing pattern that has to be done too. But other than that, as long as you do it that way, it should be fine. So the one on the left looks like they replaced a whole joist um, with two pressure treated joists, and that would be correct. And I can't really tell on the right if those two joists go all the way, but it looks like maybe someone tried to repair that at some point a long time ago and this didn't go all the way. Oh,
Mhm.
also too, you can do what's called 2/3 of the joist. So, for instance, if say you had a 12-foot joist and 1/3 of it was sort of bad in the middle, then as long as you cover 2/3 of that area, basically, 1/3. How to explain this? Um,
So 2/3 past the damaged section?
yeah, essentially. So as long as you have, if it's just a small section, and say it was 12 feet, let's say theoretically the damaged section was in the middle,
So I've
you
got
basically,
a 12-foot beam, the two center feet are damaged.
let's make it easy. The 2/3 is a little confusing. Basically, you want to go twice the distance of whatever the damaged area is. So if you had a foot of damage, then and you had a 12-foot beam, then you would want to make sure that you had at least a 6-foot section that was sistered onto that. 3 feet on either side of that 1 foot bad section. Really,
Okay.
8 feet would be even better. But honestly, once you get to that, and that's just for repair. I don't mean like a joist that's actually compromised. I just mean like maybe it's got a little bit of water damage on one part of it, but it's still structurally sound kind of deal. You know what I mean? So we,
Okay.
we run a lot across that a lot in termite damage, where you've got a beam has a little bit of termite damage in it, but maybe not all the way through and through or anything like that. So it's a little bit compromised. So we basically would sister that up, um, and that's legal as long as you use pressure treated wood. But the general rule of thumb is if you can, you want to go bearing to bearing, meaning the full length of the joist. That's not always practical or possible in all situations. So, they have other rules like that fall back.
So this is a damaged pier.
Yeah, a little bit. Looks like it. So the structural part, a lot of people don't. It depends on how old the house is. Sometimes the brick is structural, but in
It's
modern house,
this one was 1942.
yeah. So the way they did it in those days is they would build these brick piers that go all the way down to below the frost line, and then the other brick is basically a facade, which is not technically load bearing. So these you can see how it's a little square rectangular section right there. So it looks like they just got a little mortar damage or something like that. Although in this particular case, I believe it looks like the wall is partially load bearing, but the majority of the load is supposed to be carried by those piers.
Okay, so what happens when it's missing a brick at the bottom of it like this one?
Is
Yeah, it's missing a whole brick.
a
Brick
whole
fell
brick?
out of the
Yeah.
bottom.
I mean, I wouldn't freak out about it. I would just remortar the brick and put it back in. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
easy.
I mean, if the rest of it's intact, um, and then that looks like it could use a little, little mortar touch up. Looks like it had a flood too. Looks like it had multiple floods.
Yeah, it's in the flood zone.
Yeah.
It's next to the water.
So probably what happened in that case is there's some water got in there and froze in the joints and a crack, and then eventually the freezing action pushed that out.
Mhm.
That's usually what happens. So it's really important to stay on top of your masonry joints because people don't realize, like, it's when the water gets in there, they used to split granite like that. They drill little holes in granite, and then they would put water. They'd take wood pegs and they would hammer wood pegs into the stone, and then when it froze overnight, it would create a crack along the hole line. So it's really important to stay on top of any cracks that you have in your foundation of your home or your mortar and make sure that they're sealed tight just for that reason.
Okay, so we're gonna go if you guys are willing to, into a little like Q&A, like, do I need a permit? Okay, so like this particular one got called
What's the
out.
door prize? What's the door prize?
Well, I mean, I would do a door prize, but I'm here by myself. So I'm gonna find the other part of this one. So we had some issues under here. So we have just some weird stuff going on where we're just missing sections.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of issues under this one, but this one got called out for the siding going down below the deck. And the deck was not tied in to the house. Now, do I need to tie the deck into the house?
Yeah. Yeah, the deck
Every
is
time?
supposed to be, there's a couple different ways you can do it with the ledger board and stuff like that, but essentially your deck is supposed to be bolted into the house now. They will not allow nail-ins anymore.
What if
So-
I build a standalone deck? How far from the house does it have to be?
Well, technically they're all standalone decks. They're just attached
Right.
to the house, yeah. So,
Okay.
well, I think in your case you're talking about like maybe like those concrete block paver things where you just lay it on the ground. That's different. That's a little bit different.
Mhm.
So, if you're building like a traditional like walkout on deck that's at the same level as your back door, then the ledger board has to be attached to basically your ledger board, your outside sill, rim joist, excuse me, and that needs to be bolted with 1/2 inch lag bolts, and there's a whole specific code for that.
Okay.
So nailing is no longer permitted.
Okay.
So if you don't see lag bolts, under the ledger board, connecting the ledger board to the rim joist under the house, that's an issue because what'll happen is eventually that'll pull away. You know what I mean? The two structures, will
All right.
eventually work away from each other.
Mm-hmm.
by
All right, so
virtue.
let me share my screen again because now I found the screen that I want. And there we go. I just put this link in the chat for everybody. So this is where you can search. You can look up in the city of Virginia Beach. You can search for any permit on any piece of property. Permitting only has to keep records for 3 years. After that, they will go to land records. So if you want to search if you want to find out if a permit was filed on something, because a lot of times we see where somebody has filled in the garage, right? And they put HVAC to the garage, but the garage was never permitted, nor was that work permitted, right? How many thousands of times have we seen it? And the square footage doesn't match up on the tax record because it's not counted as square footage, right? Because it was never permitted work. So if you want to search for a permit in the city of Virginia Beach, you're just gonna put your address in here and your street name. And I'm just using mine because I know I pulled a permit. Nobody come stalk me, please. So if I search for a permit on a particular address, information, there we go. And I'd had pulled a permit to do an extension on my deck, as you see here. It was an extension of an existing deck. So it's not going to give you everything about it, but if you click more details, you can go to the application information. Okay. You can also go to who reviewed it and who inspected it. So Mr. Rayburn did the inspection on my thing and it was approved and passed. So, because the record is closed. I don't have, you can go in there, you could find anything you want to find, right? So, and I put that into the chat for you guys. Now, City of Virginia Beach, you have to have a permit to replace your roof. Would you agree, Bill?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I think you have to have a permit in all the cities now, except for maybe Chesapeake.
Chesapeake, you don't,
Right.
of all places.
Yeah.
But you do have to
You would think it would be uniform, but what it really boils down to is the code officials just don't have the time. And actually, in terms of roofing, the code officials actually don't have any say whatsoever in how it's done. The way it works is the manufacturer specifications take precedent over the code. Actually, believe it or not. So when we
really?
install like a GAF roof, like if the inspector doesn't like it, and I build that, not that that's ever happened, but um, if the inspector had an issue with anything we did and we installed it to the manufacturer specifications, I could tell the I could tell the I could tell the I could tell the inspector to go kick a rock.
Sorry. Um,
That's never happened, but I'm just giving you a little insight into some of the peculiarities of some of the things that we do.
right. So Chesapeake doesn't have as many older buildings as say like Norfolk, Newport News, Hampton. So in Virginia Beach doesn't have as many older roofs as those cities typically do either, including Portsmouth. So in those cities, when you go to replace a roof or do a roofing permit or a siding, you don't have to have you're allowed to just cover your house in siding. We all know this because you cover up asbestos. You don't take it down, you cover it up. But when it comes to the cities and the roofing, one of the reasons they want that permit is because if it's a tear off, you can, like the roof tear off, you have to fill out a form stating that there is no asbestos in those roof shingles.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes they do make you do that.
Yep. So, I know Newport News does it, Hampton does it, Portsmouth does it, and Norfolk does it. I do not believe Suffolk does it.
It would be really, really, really rare that you would have a roof system that's still in place that still has asbestos on it. That's really more for commercial roofs, where you could have a roof system where you got multiple layers of roofs, and the original roof was installed in like 1970 or 1980. For the most part, they haven't used asbestos in shingles in decades. So
They still make you fill out the form though.
what's that?
They still make you fill out the form though.
Yeah, they still make you fill out the form. The asbestos siding though is very, very prominent in this area. That's the sort of wavy, hard stuff that's, maybe a foot by 2 foot. That you see in a lot of the old houses. It's really hard. It's almost like Hardy Backer, really, in a way.
I mean,
So
yeah.
those asbestos, that asbestos is not fibrous. So unless you like broke all that stuff up into like little things and then put that whatever ground it up into the air, it's really it's still asbestos, but the asbestos content is really only a small percentage, and it's not really airborne. So it's not as dangerous as say asbestos insulation or something like that.
Okay, so everyone knows you need a permit. City of Hampton has got some really interesting rules about permits. Except it just doesn't like it when I do anything. So, you have to have permit for a deck, permit for a roof, permit for a pool, permit. One of the things that everybody, all of the cities, I believe, just changed is the fact that no one can pull a homeowner's permit for HVAC anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, HVAC is no, you can't do HVAC.
Because you used to be able to pull a homeowner's permit for HVAC, correct?
I don't know about that because I've never run across that myself. Because HVAC deals with Freon, and Freon is a climate issue. They generally don't want homeowners to mess with that at all.
There we go. So Hampton came out.
You can't pull a plumbing permit and an electrical permit, but
Okay.
I don't think you can pull a homeowner's permit for mechanical unless you're a mechanical contractor, and then that's
Right. You
different.
have to be a mechanical contractor to pull an HVAC permit now.
Right. Yeah.
Like even a class A contractor has to get a licensed mechanical contractor to get the permit.
Yeah.
Even though that mechanical contractor is working under that class A. The mechanical contractor is now the only one that can pull that permit. So Hampton just came out with this. They are no longer requiring a permit for roofing or re-siding residential homes. They used to do it. They did it all the way up until last year. Makes it nice for us. Let me see what we got here. So they don't like me because Suffolk is the backwoodsiest backwoods in the world. They still do not have all of their stuff updated. So this is your permit applications. Okay. And I can't remember what city I'm in. This is Norfolk. So Norfolk, like Virginia Beach, has this lovely place that you can go to search for all of your permits. Why won't you let me select you? Okay, and I will share this link in here as well for you guys. And you can search for permits anywhere in the city. So, and you can see if they passed, if they're pending approval. I actually like Norfolk's better than anybody else. So if I search my address, was it west? Was it west? West. There we go. So there you go. There's every single permit that was pulled for this address. And you can see where they were final. And where the permit was issued, the permit application date. So you see it took a little while to get them because, you know, we were doing the whole COVID thing. So it only takes a few days to get them. And then of course, when you're done, but don't forget that there is a like a rough-in permit. So as you see, if there's something wrong, rough-in approved. No, failed on insulation. So I actually really like the system for Norfolk. So another one for Norfolk. There we go. Sorry, I was trying to remember addresses from, you know, years ago. So another one for Norfolk. You see where all of the permits were pulled. You can't see who pulled them, but you can see where things were permitted. Now you can always call that city, because we've all run into it where we have all these flippers come in and they don't pull the permits. And what happens when you don't pull a permit, let's say you upgrade the electrical system and your client now buys that house, there is a chance that the city comes back and says, this is not permitted work. You need to open the walls. And now that is your client's expense. And depending on the size of the house, it could be a $10,000 expense just in the amount of drywall repair that's going to be done. So especially if somebody has, you know, done a reno on a house and is claiming that all of the systems are new, where are the permits? Because it is public information. You can call the city and you can ask for them. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. All right. So I guess I'm just going to wrap it up here if nobody's got any questions. Unfortunately, the other cities don't have a place for you to search, but you can always call permits and inspections. Remember, you want to call the permits and inspections.
Hey, Chrissy and Bill, have you guys ever seen the city come back and say, hey, this is not, I need to see, you know, the work that was done on this or anything like that? Have you ever seen the city come back and actually do that, where homeowners have to either take down drywall to show electrical, to show plumbing, or, to take down a deck
Yes.
that wasn't permitted?
Yes, I have. It was actually a house that Bill was thinking about purchasing to renovate. And they had already upgraded the electrical system. And when I called the city to find out about the permitting for it, because it didn't look quite right, the city had pending litigation against the homeowner trying to force him to open the walls. And they did let me know that should my client buy that house, the responsibility to show proof that it was done correctly would then fall on my client.
Will the lawsuit then transfer to your client's name, I wonder?
I don't know that the lawsuit would necessarily transfer to my client. What would happen is, now that my client owns the home, it is now my client's responsibility because everything dies at the closing table, right? It's now my client's responsibility to bring it to code within the city. So the city would then restart the process of, hey, you need to bring this to code. Hey, we need to see these things. And if that client did not comply or could not comply, then the city, yes, would start moving towards litigation to force their hand to do the things that they needed to do because it was unpermitted work.
I also thought that there was an issue with they have to disclose that too. Doesn't the seller have to disclose anything that
They're
is wrong with it?
supposed to, but I mean, let's be honest. How many times have we had, a seller or like somebody that claims they're a flipper try and pull a fast one?
Right. But
There's
isn't there legally though, isn't there something in the real estate contracts that says that they're supposed to disclose everything, and if they know about something and they don't disclose it, unless it's as is, right? And then of course it's all bets off. But I mean,
there's no such thing.
The
Oh.
lease pendants was just added to the listing agreement.
Yep.
Where, you mark whether or not you know about any lease pendants coming onto the property, but that was like just added in January of this year.
Now,
Right.
there is the part about in the listing paperwork about pending building violations, which, I mean, that would fall under that category. Unfortunately for us, this one in particular with the electrical issue was actually a foreclosure. And because it was a foreclosure, had I not called the city, the bank is exempt from disclosure.
right.
They don't have to disclose anything. It's
Yeah.
up to you guys to go figure it out.
Yep. Caveat emptor.
So, I've also seen one, recently where a unpermitted shed in Virginia Beach, and they made the buyer tear the shed down about a week after they closed. Not so big of a deal, but you think of like a really nice deck that wasn't permitted and the city finds out, and your lovely buyer has been in the home for 30 days and realized they have to tear out this whole lovely deck that was part of the reason they bought the house.
Yeah, that would suck.
Yep. The other issue with, unpermitted spaces, like the city's starting to, crack down quite a bit, like with unpermitted spaces where, people are converting garages without adding the square footage. If the city does find out you changed around the HVAC without a permit, they're going to want to see that. You may or may not have added electrical, but you've now quote unquote finished this space, but you didn't tear down the walls to insulate it properly. So it's unpermitted square footage. And if you did do it properly, the city wants their tax money for those livable square feet. So I've seen it cause all kinds of problems. And, this is one of the reasons that I really, really like Norfolk for the permitting process, because it's so easy to look up. You can see where, framing was done and it didn't pass the first time or the second time, or you know what I mean? So everything has to have a permit. And this was a full building permit, right? So they did, insulation, framing, all of it. And you see the order that it all has to go in, because they have to do the rough in, right? And then they have to come back and do the final. So unless you see whatever that person is advertising as, brand new, like brand new HVAC. That's wonderful that there's brand new HVAC. But do they have to pull an HVAC permit to replace the existing HVAC?
If it's in kind, if you're just replacing like an outside condenser or an
Uh-huh.
inside condenser, um, well, that's complicated. A lot of it has to do with if you're what would be called replacing in kind, and so
Oh, with like kind. Yeah.
yeah, so the thing about HVAC now is you've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 different Freon types now that are out there,
Mhm.
and they just updated to the newest Freon type. So the issue with that is like, say you've got R123 or whatever, and it's 15-year-old system, or whatever the case may be, and just the outside unit goes bad. You don't have to pull a permit to replace just the outside unit with the same unit that does the same thing with the same Freon. But if you were to like replace the whole system itself and upgrade to the new Freon system, then you have to pull a permit. And in Norfolk, you have to do air duct testing as well. So Norfolk is really, really, if you're doing an HVAC replacement job in Norfolk, you can expect to pay a couple grand more because the city's really, 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 what's the word? Um, on top of trying to make sure that the duct and the HVAC stuff works correctly. It's actually a benefit to the homeowner. And then in the end run, because they do what's called duct testing and air testing, where they actually put pressure on the duct to make sure everything's connected right, which most other cities don't require and don't do. So, you know, it's a lot of extra time and expense for the contractor. So expect to pay a couple grand more for something in Norfolk than in other cities.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Well, I gave you guys some great links. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And I hope I start seeing some people's faces. It's nice to hear your voice, Joe.
Everybody forgets to hit the unmute button. Also,
Yeah.
too, y'all, if you all have any questions and you need to reach me, my telephone number, you can
I'll
just
put it in there for you.
Chris will get you all my info.
Guadalupe, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Here, I'll put it.
Okay, I do have a question. I do have a question. Chris, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Does the city the city did find an issue with the permit, does it interfere with the closing, or can they still close? And
So
as long as
it's kind of one of those things like risk versus reward, right? What is the risk to the buyer? Okay. So let's take, okay. So if let's say that, all the electrical was updated, right? And they didn't pull a permit. That could cost your client $20,000. Is your client still willing to close? You have to let your client make that decision and let them know what could happen. Okay. That's now their choice. But take, for instance, you get a house that's a foreclosure and, you're going to go ahead and renovate it and relist it, right? So, and you're going to sell it before the 90-day stuff. And it's an FHA loan. You're going to have to provide copies of closed permits because you are going to have to prove value, which means you're going to have to tell them what you updated. And if you do not have the permits to back those up, no, it is not going to close via the lender, via underwriting.
Gotcha.
Because I had that a few years ago in Suffolk. They had upgraded the house. They hadn't done a lot of changes, but they made it pretty. But they had updated the gas hot water heater without a permit. They had updated the HVAC without a permit, and they updated the electrical. Luckily, the city of Suffolk isn't crazy strict, but they had listed the house prior to the end of the 90-day mark. And the client wanted to write on this house so badly, and they were a VA loan. And we wrote, and of course, we knew we were gonna have to jump through hoops, but they had to go retroactively back to the city to get those permits. And they got lucky that they didn't have to open the walls, because they had at least done the rough-in permit, but not the final for the electrical, and they just had to pull the permits and then have the city come out and inspect it. And it ended up delaying our closing about 4 weeks. We still did manage to close, though.
Wow, okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I hope that answers your question. Everybody else good? All right.
Yep. Thank you.
Talk to you guys later. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.